You could be a champion with that sword, Rowan.
You're not too bad with that mace either, Angus. This battle's far from over. Surround him!
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Oh man, I really thought Game of Thrones would have better CG and better acting. But what do you know? I mean, it didn't look that good to me. So that said, we are going to take a look at some nice Game of Thrones designed custom cards here. But before we enter, be wary, be warned. There may be spoilers ahead if you haven't seen Game of Thrones. So if you're worried about that, I don't think there's anything probably spoiling like the most recent episodes. But better safe than sorry, because I don't really know the show that well. So enter at your own risk. Up first here, we have Littlefinger from Fwif Force. It's a rogue legendary minion, 4-mana, 4/5. All characters can attack friendly characters. So first off, in Game of Thrones, where everybody's backstabbing everybody and nobody really knows who a friend can be, and Littlefinger, a character who represents that very well, I think this effect is just wonderful. And in fact, it's something I thought should be in Hearthstone for a really long time. I always thought when I first started playing the game that like my hero should be able to attack my own minions to do things like activate death rattles. Or if you have a death rattle minion, maybe you should be able to trade it into one of your own minions. And a character or a card like Littlefinger would enable you to do that. Now, it's just this kind of standard Yeti stat line, so you may think, well, I don't know if there's a lot of upside here. Why would I want to attack my own characters? Why would I want to trade my minions into each other? Well, at first glance, I don't really know either, right? Who knows? I just like that possibility exists. But as you consider things like, death rattle minions, for instance, if you have like a 2/2 mechanical whelp on board that you can't kill because your opponent didn't play anything, you can play another minion, you can attack your mechanical whelp into your other mechanical whelp or whatever it might be and get 2 7/7s. So there are all these little instances where, okay, like suddenly this starts to make a little bit of sense with cards like Sonya's Shadow Dancer as well. It's like, oh, okay, cool, I get it. And if you think about things like, I know I'm using some older examples here, but if you think about your Kobold Illusionist, like that's another death rattle. Maybe you can activate that death rattle without spending mana, and that saves you more mana for like an old Malygos combo. And I think opportunities like that would not only exist in the game now, but also in the future. And, Littlefinger is cool in that regard. So I think opening up this option, even if it's just one card at a time, is a cool idea, even though I think it'd be a neat mechanic in Hearthstone in general. Capturing that here with Littlefinger in such a flavorful way is really, really cool. Moving on here, let's take a look at Hold the Door, a new warrior spell, 2-mana echo. This one's from Jello Taurus. It reads, gain 3 armor. And when you cast this for the 5th time in a turn, summon Hodor. So we have Hodor here, whose name, I guess, is a reference to Hold the Door if you're a fan of the show. And I think this card's really cool. It's like, hold the door, 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 Hodor. And it captures that sort of evolution into the character we all knew really well. And there's nice passive benefit on the card Hold the Door, right? You're not only gaining 15 armor, you're also going to get this giant 8-mana 5/12 taunt, where all your emotes are Hodor, which again is really funny and flavorful. So all in all, you basically look at this and you've got a 10-mana card that's a 5/12 taunt that gains you 15 armor. And that's really good, right? Like that's a big defensive opportunity. Like, okay, boom, that's a big hit. Like if you compare that to something like, Sleepy Dragon, for instance, it's a 9-mana 4/12 taunt, but you don't get 15 armor. And I know that's powerful, but I think that's frankly okay. Like 10 mana plays need to be powerful, and it's something, it's kind of an Omega card in a way, right? Like if you really want to get the impact, you have to play it on turn 10. There's no other ways to like utilize this minion on its own, so you can't like flex in another turn. You're fully committed to it. Unlike, you have minions in your deck, you can summon them with recruits and from hand and all kinds of stuff. So there are some essentially limitations and ways to hold this back from being absolutely crazy, but it's still going to be a play that probably feels rather safe on turn 10 if you're looking to do this. And if you're desperate and you just really need 9 armor, so you have to do this on turn 6 to stay alive, you can do that too in a pinch, but you're going to lose your Hodor later, which a lot of games might demand that. If you're playing against an aggro deck with no other plays, it's like, well, crap, I just got to hold the door a few times here. There's no Hodor on the way, but maybe I can get the second one later. So to me, I think it's a strong card, admittedly, and maybe not something a lot of people would want for Warrior right now because they already have a lot of defensive tools. But I don't want to judge it in the context of a meta that's happening only today. Whereas I think a card like this, perhaps in the past or perhaps in the future, would be a pretty cool late game survival and control tool for Warrior that, again, is just incredibly thematically fitting for the character and for the theme here. Up next, let's take a look at Catelyn Stark from Faerun, a 3-mana 2/5 Death Rattle. Add Lady Stoneheart to your hand. And Lady Stoneheart is a 3-mana 5/2 with a battle cry. Destroy any minion that attacked Catelyn Stark this game. So we have this idea of, like, you know, you play out a rather innocent looking minion, and then if she dies, you've got this sort of revenge component. So if your opponent trades, for instance, an 8/8 Mountain Giant into your Catelyn Stark, then Lady Stoneheart is going to be able to swing back and kill that Mountain Giant with her really efficient battle cry. And you might say, well, of course, Regis, nobody would ever attack into a 2/5 Catelyn Stark because they don't want to lose their 8/8 on the revenge swing. And you're right, which means you have a 5 health minion around that might have the ability to play into things like Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, or set up priest combos, because that high health total is really cool. So you create this sort of friction moment where sometimes Lady Stoneheart's probably not going to do anything. Your opponent just trades in a couple minions and they die. Other times you create opportunities where it's like your opponent has to make a really tough decision. Do they sacrifice the thing to give you the free tempo of the swing? And then, frankly, if all that backfires and fails, you've still got a minion here at 2/5 stat line for 3 really isn't too bad. You've got Death Rattle synergies, which for Priest have certainly been a thing in the past, and you've just got, you know, a big pile of stuff. 2 minions for 1 3-mana card is a bit of a value opportunity, so you can just play a lot of stats and stay on curve too. And that means this card does a couple of different things and feels very fitting and has some opportunity that matches up with what the class is intended to do, and because of that, I think I really like this card. So now let's move on to Tyrion Lannister, 10-mana rogue hero card from Gamer Candy. Battlecry reads, for the rest of the game, the cost of your minions is equal to their lowest stat. So anything that's low in stature tends to benefit you with this particular card. And it has a 0-mana hero power called Persuasion. It reads, spend all of your mana, give a friendly minion that much attack this turn, and rush. So clearly with Tyrion, the hero card here, it's all about minions that have these sort of mismatched stat values where one number is way lower than the cost, so you can benefit in some big way. So think Evil Miscreant, a card you see a lot in Rogue right now. It has a 1-mana attack, so it only costs 1 mana. That would be a really cheap combo card. If you think about things like Malygos, for instance. Malygos is a 4/12. That means it would only cost 4 to play yourself a Malygos, which I know creates all kinds of crazy combo opportunities, but you know, this is a 10-mana hero card. It's going to take a while to play this, and frankly, the turn you play this, you do very, very little to stay alive. So it's an incredibly risky card to play. So if a card like this enables some cool combos with Malygos, I'm okay with that. I just like the idea of this building towards some kind of, you know, late game combo, sneaky, crazy sort of rogue that just plays in a different way than anything we've ever seen before. Then you've got this this hero power here too, where if you're getting all these cheap and discounted minions because of the Battlecry effect on Tyrion, then you can make them more impactful. So for instance, if you play an Evil Miscreant for 1 mana, you have Persuasion, you can spend your remaining 9 mana, you can make that a 9/5 rush minion in a single turn, which helps you have more impact with these perhaps oddly statted minions, which typically you're probably going to bias them towards low attack and high health. So what exactly does a deck look like that supports this? I have no idea. There's no way to know, but there are probably some out there that could utilize this effect in a really cool and creative way, and that sort of opportunity, that unique spin or that unique new idea is exactly why I think this is a really nice card. Up next here I have Kyrin Halfhand, a 3-mana 2/4 from Quasi Spatial. It's for Hunter, and the text reads, whenever you would draw a card, cast Tracking instead. So this captures the idea here of Kyrin being like this master sort of scout where he's just always tracking every card draw. I think this is a crazy cool idea for a couple reasons. So first and foremost, right, when you play Kyrin yourself and you activate your own card draw via whatever card draw mechanic, you get tracking. So you get to pick. You get to discover something very specific that you want, which can be very powerful to help you find things. If you just play this with a couple card draws and you get to pick 3 or 4 cards of choice in a single turn, that can be really, really powerful. Now, admittedly, you're going to be destroying half your deck in the process, which a lot of people are going to freak out about and say, oh my God, Regis, that's terrible. Some of you out there still hate tracking. which I want to change your mind, but you're very stubborn. So that's a conversation for another day. But that means that you can pick like 2 kill commands maybe in a single turn and get tons of burst damage, or 2 of your really important combo pieces, or value minions, or your Death Knight, or your hero card, or whatever it is in whatever format you're trying to accomplish. Corrin can enable you to find very specific sorts of things fairly consistently. There's always downside with tracking that you get 2 things you like at a single time, but it just makes each card draw that much more decisive and influential and impactful. Now, the other reason I think this card is cool is because of the way this would work on your opponent's turn. If they forced you to draw a card, Hearthstone right now doesn't have any sort of operations during your opponent's turn, and that certainly wouldn't change for a single card like Corrin Halfhand, because that would completely change the structure of how the game plays. So what that means is, it would be like when Zul'jin casts tracking for you, where it just picks one randomly and throws out the other 2. So there is a little bit of like risk here anytime your opponent can make you take card draw. Now, in standard format, it's a little bit harder these days, but if you think about Wild, with Naturalize and Cold Light Oracles, suddenly they could like really destroy half of your deck in no time at all without actually giving you any of the benefits of choice. So maybe something that would be pretty risky and Wild for one reason or another, but a cool card that just lets you build decks in a really intentional way and try to find specific sorts of things, and it makes your card draw less random and more impactful. So I like this idea a lot. I think it's a super cool design. I don't know that it would see all that much play in every deck, but I think there might be 1 or 2 that could really make a case for a card like this. So now let's move on to the Mother of Dragons from AV4, probably the most commonly submitted character. Well, actually, you know what? Arya Stark might have been number 1, but they were certainly close. Some version of Khaleesi or Dany, whatever you want to call her here. This one from AV4 is a 6 mana 3/6 battle cry. Put all dragons in your deck at the top of your deck in a random order. So she truly is the Mother of Dragons here, pulling all of the dragons into the fray immediately thanks to this battle cry. So kind of setting up this tutor effect in a way. It's kind of a delayed tutor, but filtering them all to the top so that you can draw your dragon specifically. And I think that's really cool for a couple reasons. One, you might just have a dragon deck that relies on dragon synergy, so you need to make sure that you have some dragons in hand, and this could help you do that or achieve that without necessarily like looking for them in the mulligan or, you know, risking having some dead awkward cards in hand too soon. So in a pinch, she can get you, you know, what you need for synergies. Beyond that, she can just help you find really powerful cards. Dragons often are powerful, so if you really need a Malagos, that might be the only dragon you run, and Mother Dragons would help you find it. Same for Ysera, Alexstrasza, etc. That said, there is a little bit of risk here too with a card like this, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to draw any spells for a while if I have 4 or 5 dragons, so there's some magic number of dragons you might need in your hand, and then if you have too few, she might be a totally dead card sometimes. So she's a little bit risky to run in that regard. But I also like the fact that this is a 6 mana card instead of like a 2 mana card, because that means, you know, it's like, okay, it's turn 6, I need some late game threats. I'm going to plop Mother of Dragons down, and then my next few draws are going to be really big, strong things. And that helps you maintain this sort of consistent curve that maybe like a mid-range deck could utilize really well if you're looking to hit certain things at certain times. So all in all here, a pretty weak minion in and of herself. Like a 3/6 for 6 is a terrible stat line. There's a big downside, but you're building up for this cool opportunity for dragons to come out of the deck and just do something awesome or impactful or by design. And I think that's a really cool way to design a card like this. There were so many different versions that kind of went nuts or did too many crazy things or just like summoned a billion dragons onto the board. This one to me was a little bit more subtle and felt more like a realistic sort of Hearthstone card, minus maybe the artwork here, which I do not know would make its way into a Blizzard game. But hey, I liked it. So what are you going to do? And for many of those reasons, that's why I chose this card. So up next here, let's take a look at Viserion the Ice Dragon from Experio 28. This is an 8 mana 8/8 neutral dragon, and it has Taunt and Death Rattle. Shuffle Rhaegal into your deck and freeze all minions. And then we'll talk about that more in a second, but Rhaegal is an 8 mana 8/8 dragon. He's got Rush and Poisonous and Battle Cry. Shuffle Drogon into your deck. And Drogon is the final piece of this chain here, and Drogon has Charge as an 8 mana 8/8, and when you draw him, he is summoned from hand, so you don't even really have to spend that 8 mana. As soon as you draw him, you're getting a free 8/8 with Charge. So the idea here is to create this really powerful chain of dragons that are all going to be pretty good draws. In particular, Drogon's a really high tempo, high impact sort of card that could probably just win you a lot of games on its own because of all that aggressive charge damage. Now, the question is, getting to Drogon, how well does that work? So Viserion, I think, actually is really, really strong too. And I know that this card is pretty good, and a lot of you are freaking out, like saying this card's a little bit too good, or maybe think it's too good. Maybe. I think maybe, right? It could be. If you compare it to something like Lich King, though, I actually don't really think it's much better than Lich King. And I like the idea that it is a sort of Lich King card, that big neutral threat that a lot of different decks can run. I think those are actually really good for the game when there is that card. It's like that iconic big-time threat that both control and aggro decks can sometimes run as a finisher, or control decks can just run as a piece of the puzzle. I think Viserion would be good for that. And the reason I think this card's not too crazy good is because the power on it is really a death rattle. So your opponent does have opportunities to silence or counter these things without you creating this chain. Because freeze all minions, frankly, is really, really insanely good, right? Playing something like this and shutting out your opponent's board, but it's a death rattle, so it's on delay, and your opponent has options to like trade stuff in, maybe nothing gets frozen. So it's not like the freeze all minions is going to be that impactful. And then I think Rhaegal, the second part of this puzzle, is actually probably the worst of the three. Rush and Poisonous clearly are powerful sorts of things, but an 8/8 Rush minion for 8 is not like crazy good, right? And the Poisonous will only matter a very small amount of time if you're killing like a 12 health Malagos or whatever, right? But if you think about, things like Mulch Munchers, for instance, or the Burly Shovel Fist, the new card, neither of those are like dominating the game, and Mulch Muncher can be a 0 mana 8/8 with Rush, right? So Rhaegal, I think, is the weakest, and that's important because Drogon is so good that you need this kind of delay to get there, and it takes a few different draws, and it takes a little while to fulfill this chain of events, but you're just adding 3 pretty solid bodies into your deck, so there's a lot of value, there's some fatigue protection. So all in all, I think this is a neat idea for like a control deck or a mid-range deck, maybe even an aggro deck too, who knows, right? Like, they can run Lich King in the past and those sorts of cards. Maybe you could run a card like this. Seems a little more defensively minded, but I like that it still has some ability to react to it and to deny this opportunity, but also has a lot of upside. So to me, just like one of those big crowning jewel style legendaries that certainly captures the dragons of Game of Thrones rather nicely. So all in all, Xperio 28, I think this is a really nice card. So now let's talk about Arya Stark, probably the most common character submitted, and many of the cards shared a very similar mechanic to this one in one way or another, this faceless idea where you're becoming other things. And this version from Amazing Gordo just kind of stood out to me as the best execution of it, partly from just a cleanliness and like artwork standpoint. Like, the card looked really good and also seemed to capture it in a pretty simple and elegant way. So this 6 mana 3/6 reads, whenever this attacks and kills a minion, become a copy of it, and that it keeps this effect. So Aria is now basically kind of rejuvenating herself all the time into a new minion that retains its ability to transform again into a new minion. So one point of clarity I want to offer on this card is that it reads whenever this attacks, which I think means, at least my interpretation of this card, and I'm curious to hear if you guys disagree, means that if she attacks into something and dies during the exchange, she will still transform into that thing. Unlike Darius Crowley, we've seen in the past, where his effect reads after this attacks and kills a minion, not whenever. So he has to be alive for that to resolve. Some of you may think Arya still has to be alive. To be 100% sure, I don't know the answer. I am not sure at all. So I want to hear your thoughts, but I'm operating under the assumption that if she attacks and kills something and dies in the process, that she will become a copy regardless. She will essentially ignore her death effect because it's whenever, not after, and it will resolve simultaneously to the attack before it has actually processed her death. Now, operations aside, what that still means is she's going to be attacking stuff that has relatively low health on often, right? Often, because it's becoming a copy, not like a fresh copy. So if you attack like a 7/3 Archvillain Ratham and she kills it, she's going to become a copy of a 7/3 Archvillain Ratham, presumably not a 7/8 Archvillain Ratham. So it is going to be hard to keep your Arya alive for long, but theoretically she could turn into 3 or 4 or 5 minions, right? Particularly if you give her any sort of attack buff where she can get to like 7 or 8 attack and attack things that are much higher health, like she can transform into something with higher health. And that creates this really interesting chain where it's like, oh, she just keeps killing big stuff and turning into stuff that still has a lot of health remaining, as opposed to simply 3 health remaining, which would enable her to kill it in the first place. So interesting idea for a card here. Maybe actually not the simplest now that I think about it. It's hard to expound on this and explain it well. But I think in theory, a card that still creates a lot of opportunity and some cool moments because of the way it retains the effect, which a lot of people didn't put in the card text for very similar designs, which means as soon as it transformed, it never got to do it again. And she just gets to keep doing it and keep this chain going. So it's this game of keeping a thing alive. Perhaps Priest in particular would love to use a card like this to give it extra health so it can take multiple trades and just keep healing it and feeding into this one minion, which I think is really, really cool idea. So perhaps I didn't explain this particularly well, but I really like this card and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it too, because interpretations could really change how exactly this one works and how good it might be. So share your thoughts in the comments below on this one. Up next here, let's look at the Loyal Lute player from Imaginary MDA, a 3-mana 2/4 Paladin minion battlecry. Add Reigns of Castamere to your hand and Death Rattle, discard it. So for those of you who may not know the show too well, Reigns of Castamere is basically like the song of Game of Thrones, and we've got a Lute player here who's playing the song. So when you play the Loyal Lute player, you've got this song in hand that you can now use, but if the Loyal Lute player dies, he's no longer able to play the song, so the song gets discarded. And the Reigns of Castamere is a 4-mana spell. It's also a twin spell that reads destroy your opponent's highest attack minion. So really a rather nice removal spell here that's quite flexible. Like you could use it on a small board if you had to, just to deal with like a 3/3, or you could kill something really big with it as well, but it's just kind of a walk the plank style spell, and you get it twice, right? So 1 3-mana minion turning into 2 big removal spells is pretty amazing, but if you don't use your Reigns of Castamere immediately, that means you risk losing them, and if you discard the top half, you know, that's both parts are gone. If you discard the second half, you only get to use it once, which might reduce the impact. And what that means is if you play this like on curve, for instance, you might not really get much out of it. Your opponent might just wipe it and you never get to use your Reigns of Castamere. If you play this turn 7 or later, you might be able to get 1 removal card out of your Loyal Lute player, but you risk losing the second. And actually getting both parts of it are going to be really, really tough. So it's all about keeping this dude alive so that you're able to use your Reigns of Castamere enough over a long-term game to make it make sense. So there is probably a little bit of risk in, like, you know, the fact that this is an epic and you could run 2 of these, and that's potentially like 4 extra single target removal cards added to your deck. But because of this Death Rattle, I think that does actually help keep a card like this in check. It might actually just be like running 2 single target removal spells, and maybe it feels a little bit more like a bad Vile Spine Slayer most of the time, for instance, right? A less flexible 7-mana Vile Spine Slayer is what it actually kind of ends up looking like if you think about it. And that's I like that risk and reward, where it's like there's some upside here if you can manage to support it. Otherwise, this thing could backfire and be a pretty weak card. So I think probably a good card on average, to be honest. But that balance and that aspect of it, and of course just capturing the idea of a dude playing a song. I'm really a sucker for like bards for some reason in medieval fantasy of any sort. So I like that, I think, more than anything. And just capturing the iconic Game of Thrones song at this point is really cool too in card format. So I like a few different aspects of this card quite a bit. And then finally here, one last card. This is a Game of Thrones from British Dino. And hey, that's the name of the show. How cute. This is a legendary quest for warrior that reads kill 7 minions with a weapon. And your reward is the Iron Throne, which captures the whole premise of the show. I think that's cool. And the Iron Throne is a 5-mana 8/8, as many quest rewards have been. And it reads your hero has taunt and battle cry gain 15 armor. So I think this card creates this really cool mechanic here, really cool race, which we've certainly seen cards in the past that give your hero taunt. But I like that this one adds a little bit of complexity to it, because to get to the point where your hero has taunt, which means your minions are immune from taking minion damage, they can only be killed via spells or battle cries. What that means is you have to kill a lot of stuff with weapons, 7 minions with a weapon, which, by the way, is not super hard to activate if you think about, you know, for instance, Soul Thrays, that's 4 attacks right there. You kill 4 minions with Soul Thrays, you're more than halfway home. Any sort of Fire War Axe is just a couple extra minions. Notably, if you think about things like Super Collider, it may not work as well as you think because you're often not killing either minion with your weapon with Super Collider. The minions are actually killing each other. The weapon damage from Super Collider very rarely actually kills anything, so that's not going to be like an easy way to do it. But still, I think getting to 7 minions with the weapon isn't particularly hard, but in the process, and the point I'm trying to make, is that you often take a lot of face damage if you're killing minions with your weapon. You're taking a lot of big hits in order to do that, which means your health is going to be low, which means it might be risky to give yourself taunt, because your opponent might actually just be able to run through all of your stuff and just smork you down really quickly. And the 15 armor from the Iron Throne may not be enough to sort of overcome that. The 5-mana 8/8 is certainly nice too, but it's going to be played probably beyond turn 5. Often it might take till turn 6 or 7 or something to complete this, because you only get 1 attack per weapon outside of Soul Rays. So, an 8/8 on turn 8 or 9 may not quite be as impactful, and it might just be too late, and you might actually risk running a card like this because you're going to die. And all of those different components to me kind of feels like Game of Thrones. Like, do I make this move? Do I not make this move? How risky is this maneuver? Am I going to get punished for this? Like, can I afford to backstab this person in order to try to win the throne? And all these different aspects. Like, it kind of feels like the show. It feels like these sort of decisions. So maybe I'm making it a little bit too meta or analyzing a little too much, but I like that idea, and I think this card is fun, both functionally and, of course, capturing the theme. So great way to cap off the video here. As far as I'm concerned, a pretty cool card too. And there you go, folks. The Game of Thrones custom card review is done. I'm sure I missed some cool references and neat little things in these cards based on show lore or book lore, so please feel free to expand on those in the comments below. I want to hear all about that stuff. I want to hear all the neat little things I didn't quite see, because I'm not the biggest fan of the franchise. I've watched some of it, but not all of it. That said, I'm sure you're also curious about the theme for next time. Well, you can, of course, get the link in the description below to see all of the details, but it's going to be based on Pandaria cards. I want you to make things themed around the continent of Pandaria. So they can be any of the like world bosses. They can be pandas, iconic pandas like Chin or Lily. They can be, just spells from that era of World of Warcraft. Whatever you want, as long as it's connected in some way to Pandaland in WoW, that's going to be perfect. So, again, let me see all of your cute, cuddly panda cards is basically the goal this time around. But until then, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, game on.